Hello! So I decided the following course should be free. Normally it goes for around 50 euros, so I listed it for 50, but with sales sometimes on ArtStation and other stores, it goes for about 30 euros, 40 euros. But why just let's just make it free. So yeah, here you go. If you're interested in photogrammetry and want to test it, want to start with it, that's the perfect beginner course. And let me know if you enjoy it, and if so, maybe leave a like, maybe subscribe, and yeah, I see you guys in the next video. Bye. Hello everyone, my name is Philipp Schmidt. I work in the games industry since 2016 and I worked on titles like The Climb, Onward, and the last 5 years I worked for Epic Games Quixel on Megascans. So I scan a lot of stuff. And this course is an introduction to photogrammetry. I'm not covering basic 3D, so UVs, low polys. We are just talking about scanning, getting everything into the software and out of the software, and from then on you are free to follow your normal game art pipeline. So this is part of a series. There will be multiple courses, and we start this one in a studio because it's a controlled environment, it's easy to begin with, and we just need some easy to get set up and some easy object. I use an apple, you can use whatever you want. Just make sure the shape is really easy to understand and it's not too complex. I'll show you the whole setup for scanning, all the softwares you need and how to export it, and we will compare the most known photogrammetry softwares like RealityCapture and Metashape. So I would say let's stop talking and get into it. I see you in the course. So let's quickly talk about what photogrammetry even is. There is so much deep dive we could do here. Let's just cover a real basic, but everybody can understand. So photogrammetry is basically you take a lot of pictures or images from an object or a scene or an environment, whatever you want to capture. And based on these images, the software you are using is identifying feature points or some overlap where features in both images are matching. It's marking these matches and is creating a point cloud based on these matches. When you have enough information, you can stitch all these feature points together so you get your 3D mesh. And that's the basic of photogrammetry, so that's the real basic. There is overlap involved, which is the line of sight you can see in this image, because you need enough overlap in all of your images to be able to get a point cloud, which is the base for a 3D object. But that's basically how it works. You need images. These images will be feed into a software, and the software is generating a point cloud, which will be used as a base for a 3D mesh. So why is this useful for games? Sounds like a lot of work. If we look at this image, which is already a few years old, photogrammetry can save a lot of time because you don't need to do everything by hand. The high poly process, which can take up to a week, so DICE is using 5 days here, but depending on what you do, it can take longer or shorter. But you can see the whole process goes from 2 weeks to 5 days, so 5 to 7 days, depending on whatever you do. Because the high poly is just being scanned. We call it scanned. I mean, it's not technically a scan, but yeah, it's easier to say. So the high poly will be scanned, and this can take from, depending on what you scan, like from 2 minutes to maybe a few hours and not days. And that's already a huge time saver. And after that, you just follow your normal game art pipeline, but you already saved a lot of time beforehand. So before you do the VTopo, UV layout, texture, and so on. And that's what we will cover in this course. So we will focus on high poly, not VTopo, no UV layout, stuff like this. Because that's just your basic game art pipeline, which you can do when you have your high poly scan. But that's why photogrammetry is such a cool tool. You save a lot of time and you also get the most realistic output you can. I mean, if you scan an apple or you build it by hand and texture it by hand, it will never look like real, because the scan is based on real data you just captured. If you take 200 pictures, you capture 200 real images from a real apple, and you can't get any closer than this. The other option would be a 3D scan, which is good, way more expensive, and the textures are not really great, but there is a way to combine laser scan and photogrammetry, but that's a whole different topic and a whole different price league. Photogrammetry is great. There is a bright future for this technique. So it would be wise to learn it, because more studios are hopping on this train. And even if they are not doing their own scans, they still need people who can manage scans and work with scans. Like, a lot of people are buying from Epic Games the Quixel Megascans library. There are other libraries. And it makes sense to know how this stuff is done, how you can scan your own assets. And it's a lot of fun. So, yeah, I would say let's stop it here. You have a rough overview on what photogrammetry is, and I would say let's get started with scanning, or let's see what we need to scan our own assets. I'll see you in the next video then. So let's get started with the hardware list. I sorted them roughly by importance, and obviously we need to start with the camera. That's the one I just showed you. That's the one I'm using at the moment. You can get it for about 880. So these are all new prices. That's not eBay or something else. I'm pretty sure you can save a lot of money by buying used. And keep in mind, you don't need everything new. If you buy a camera used, that's totally fine. Just make sure it doesn't have, like, I don't know, 200,000 images already taken, because that's a little bit much. But I would say everything up to 50,000 is completely fine. Yeah, new prices. So just the case. Let me switch the language to English real quick. So only the case is about 880. But here in Germany, at least, they have a set with a 28-70 lens for about 950, which is quite okay. I just bought the case because I already had a lens, and I'm using a 24-70 lens, which is about 650 euros, which is not a fixed lens, it's a zoom lens. Fixed lenses are in general sharper, but because I'm scanning so much different stuff all the time, sometimes I'm scanning indoors some assets, sometimes I'm scanning outdoors, and I'm not scanning that much at the moment, a fixed lens is completely fine. This is not a waste of money or something. That's still a really, really good lens. But in general, it's better to have like 2 or 3 fixed lenses for all the different tasks, you could cover with photogrammetry. Normally, you need a 24, a 45, or a 50, or 55, and sometimes a force lens like a macro lens like 90 millimeters or 105, but that's really next level advanced stuff. So I'm using this one. You could use basically every lens you want. I just use it because of the range I have, like 24-70 millimeters. So I can get pretty close if I have a smaller asset. And if I have like an average sized asset, like maybe a piece of cardboard or a cardboard box, more a cardboard box, I can still go to 35 or 50 millimeters and I still get really good results. By the way, this one is at least that important as this case. So don't make the mistake and think, well, this one only has 24 megapixels. That's still plenty, because the megapixels are just something for the software to calculate, and for RealityCapture it's basically how they price your asset. So if you have more megapixels, your asset will be more expensive, because the software sees you have 40 or 50 megapixels instead of 24. So they have more to calculate, so the export will be more expensive. And a big mistake people are doing is getting a better case, like maybe this new Sony camera with 33 megapixels, or even a R version which has about 50 millimeters, and they still use a cheaper lens, like maybe a 100 euro lens, but they still get not really nice results. That's because they save a lot of money on the lens. So make sure to do your research on a good lens. This one is really good for just getting started. It seems expensive, but this thing is really well built. And yeah, I mean, there is a lot of glass in it, so that's why it's so expensive. But that's not even really expensive for a lens. So yeah, this one is really important. I really can recommend this one. And also important is the next part, your tripod. It's important in the sense you put a lot of stuff on it. So you need something which can hold it. And 90 euros with this coupon applied isn't really that much. It goes up to, well, it says max load capacity 12 kilograms. Let's say 8 or so. Don't trust these numbers all the time. But I never had trouble with this one, and that's the exact one I'm using. I also have the carbon one, which is a little bit lighter. It can't hold that much. I think it's up to 8 kilograms or so. Yeah. So yeah, this one for 12 kilograms is completely fine. Then you need a CPL filter for your lens. So if you check your lens, you see some diameter. So here it's 76 millimeters. And that's the size you need for your filter, because it goes in front of the lens. And if you rotate it, it will block out the light. Get the right size. You see there are a lot of different sizes. You need the right diameter for your lens. But most of the time, that's even printed on the lens case. I can insert an image here. And I use a KNF for, I don't know, for at least 5 years. They are a bit more expensive, but you also don't want the really cheap ones, because cheaper can be a little bit worse in terms of the amount of foil they put into the filter, or the quality could be a little bit worse. So I always spend a little bit more on my filter and make sure I have something which works even if it gets a little bit dirty or after more than 2 years. And I think about 50 euros, 60 euros isn't really that much for a good filter. So that's an okay price. And then you need a flash. So that one is always a little bit more expensive. It's not even listed on Amazon anymore. So the last time I checked, mine was used. I bought mine used on eBay with 2 batteries. So that's the battery here. I paid about 400 euros. And that's really fine with 2 batteries. One battery new is about 70, and I got everything for about 400 with shipping. The Godox one is one you can get a lot of attachments for, which we will cover next, because that's the flash, but we need to polarize the flash like we do with our lens. So the filter on the lens and the filter later on the flash need to be in sync to get a polarized image. That flash is really powerful. It's really bright. You also need something to control it. In here you can use a wireless adapter. This one for 26 euros, or you can do it via cable, whatever fits your needs or whatever your camera supports. I'm using a wireless trigger, which I will show you. And yeah, really nice flash. I can't say anything bad about it. I really suggest getting this one. There are alternatives, but I'm a fan of this one. So then you need a polarizer for the flash itself. So it looks like this. That's the flash unit, and there is basically a big polarizer like this one, just sitting on the flash. And that one is 3D printed from a German company I already covered on my channel. I have the exact unit. It's 100 euros. That's completely fine. You can print it yourself, and you can get the film for yourself on Amazon. It's like about 30 to 50 euros, depending on the grade and the polarization angle. That's a calculation you have to do for yourself. 3D printing is cool. I use it a lot, but some prints need to be paused, and you need to insert the magnets while it's still sitting on the print bed, and it can be annoying. So I just paid the price, and yeah, it's really, really worth the investment. It's a super good construct. It's super well built. It's super good to rotate it and to turn off the filter if needed. I really would go again for the 100 euro filter, and yeah, just get this one if you have the money and if you want to save some time. So then we have the flash trigger. That's just a normal wireless trigger, which is sitting on the camera on the cable shoe. It's controlled via batteries, and you can control the flash over these buttons. Turn on the light, turn off the light, and trigger the flash. 40 euros, 45 euros. Yeah, completely fine. You can even get a cheaper one like a XT16, but I went for this one. Yeah, can't say anything bad. It's just a wireless trigger, works really well. Then we have the color checker, which is needed for calibrating your color. If you scan outside, it's really needed. For the inside, I would say, if you don't care about color accuracy, you can skip it or get a cheaper one. I use the Passport Photo for, I don't know, a lot of years. That's my second one. I change mine every 2 years because at some point the colors can get washed out. But yeah, that's just something for me because I do that commercially, and I want to have my colors accurate every single time. So I change mine, I think, every 2 years. Yeah, like I said. And there are cheaper versions. I think you can get away with the classic card, which can be a little bit big, but if you look just for color checker on Amazon, there should be plenty to choose from. Like stuff like this works. We basically just need the gray area, not even really the colors. And I'm pretty sure you can find cheaper alternatives. Yeah, like the data color spider checker here, which is 40 euros. Let's see, how big is this? Yeah, it's not really saying how big it is, but this one could work also. It's just needed to make a profile, or you don't even need a profile. You can just import the raw image into Lightroom and just pick your color you want for the calibration, and that's everything we need it for. So yeah, color checker, that's a Passport one, really small, really, really tough build. So it looks small and finicky because it's plastic, but it's really robust. So yeah, totally worth the price. That's my small, cheap turntable. You can build yourself. You can build yourself one if you have the time and want. I just got the cheapest one I could find because it's just a turntable. For me, the most important part is that they have a remote control with the numpad, because the numpad or the numbers on the numpad normally dictate the angle the turntable can rotate. And this one has it. It's like 50 euros, so I just got it. And this one also has some colored plates in the bottom right here. I mean, the only interesting one is the black one. If I want to use it, I have it. I still would add some cloth on it, which has the same amount of black like my background has, just for a better separation, but it's still a nice to have. And for 50 euros with a 20 kilogram capacity, completely fine. That's just some stands for the background you could get. I have something else, but I also used this exact unit. Worked really well. You just needed to hang your background, which we will cover next. And yeah, that's just some 3x3 meter background. I use 2x3 meters because I operate in a smaller area, but normal photo background, nothing fancy. Like I said in the part before, just make sure to keep it clean, because these are very easy to get dirty and they collect a lot of dust, and because it's black, you see it every time. So maybe get a small vacuum also if you're shopping for the stuff I show you. And yeah, make sure to keep everything clean. And that's basically the hardware you need. Maybe I forgot something. If so, I will update it somehow. But that should cover everything you need for studio scanning. And now we have our hardware. Let's make sure we take a look at the software we need. So now we have the hardware. Let's talk about the software real quick. There are basically the photogrammetry software we need. Then there is Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom. That's not even worth covering because we just use it for a few seconds to adjust the images. And the 3D software of your choice. So let's get started with Metashape, which is one of the two photogrammetry softwares I cover. There are plenty. There are a lot of free softwares, but these two, like Metashape and RealityCapture, are the ones which basically every studio is using. And yeah, I would say these are the standard. So Metashape was known for being quite slow. The results were good, but it was really demanding on the hardware. So you needed quite a beefy machine to be able to run it to its full potential. It still is, but it got a lot better over the last, I would say, 3 years or so. The really good point this program has is the price. If we go in an online store here and check the price, it's $180 one time with free updates. And that's really cheap for what this program can do. The only downside is if we compare the versions. So we have the professional edition, which is 3.5K, so about $3,500. And the standard one for 180. We don't have any marker or scale bar support. For studio scanning, that isn't really a problem, but the next time we will go out in the advanced course, we will use some markers. And that's basically already setting the software we want to use, because we will use RealityCapture for that one, because Metashape isn't supporting scale bars. It is, but only in the expensive version. Besides that, everything is fine. We don't need LiDAR support or satellite image processing, stuff like that. It's working really good for, I would say, 99% of the stuff you do. And it's only $180, which is, yeah, basically nothing. You can just order it online. You get it, you get a license key and you download it. Works super well. Then we have RealityCapture. So the download is free, but they need to generate some money somehow. So how much is RealityCapture in the end? Well, that really depends on what you do. So RealityCapture changed his model a few years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I can't remember. They changed it to a PPI license. So that's basically saying you give us the images you have, let's say 100 images for the Apple we want to do, and they check how many megapixels these images have, and based on this calculation, they calculate an export fee. So that's what I said before. The more megapixels you have, the higher this fee will go. You can see equals to 40,000 megapixels, equals to 32,000 megapixels. And yeah, that's basically saying how much you can get out for the money you put in. So you're basically paying for credits. Or you can buy the unlimited license, which yeah, is basically the same like this $100 version, $180 version in terms of price, not comparing the features, just what this license is. This really depends on how serious you are. At some point, this makes sense, depending on how many stuff you scan. Just get the $10 version if you want to try it out. You only have to pay on export, so you can do everything in the software I will show you, but the only thing you need to pay is when you click export, then you enter your PIN code and pay about, I would say for the Apple, about $2 or so, $2 to $3, maybe less, maybe more, but in this range. It's not that bad if you just scan from time to time. I would stick with these packages. And if you are really serious, I mean, I guess you already have this license or your company owns this license and you can just use it. Really nice. It's supporting scripting, so you can automate the scanning process or the process of RealityCapture running. And yeah, that's RealityCapture. It's really easy to use in terms of interface. It's I think simpler to understand than Metashape. Metashape isn't bad. It's just, in my opinion, it's easier to understand. And yeah, these are the softwares I will cover. So maybe get both. You can try, I think, Metashape. Let's see here. Try it now. And you will have like a 30-day test period, I guess. Make sure to read through it, what this test version can do or can't do. I'm pretty sure there is some limitation to it. But for just getting started, you can use the test version. And they also have some sample data you can check out. Here we can see like the markers. And this is supported by RealityCapture on default. So that's quite useful for outdoor scans. Sometimes for indoor scans too. But for the stuff we are doing, it's not really that needed at the moment. So that's the software we use, or that's the software I'm using on my day-to-day work. And yeah, now we have the hardware, now we have the software. So let's maybe go over what we can scan and what can't be scanned. So I see you in the next video. So what can be scanned and what can't be scanned? Well, technically there is nothing which can't be, or what can't be scanned. There is this article I always have in my head when I hear that stuff. It's just how you approach it. So obviously that's a glass ball. There is a rule. Everything too shiny, well, too shiny isn't really defined, but reflective or shiny stuff or mirror-like objects can't be scanned. I call it scanned, or can't be shot in photogrammetry. With a laser, that's a different approach. We won't cover that. But with the camera, it can be tricky. However, it's just how you approach that stuff. This can't be scanned with the camera. That's, yeah, obviously. I mean, it's glass. So the problem is the reflectivity and the smoothness of the object is the main problem for the software. The camera doesn't have a problem with shooting pictures. That's really easy for the camera. That's the stuff it made. That's the stuff it can do. So taking pictures. And Lightroom can calibrate this picture or these pictures you take. That's no problem. The problem is the software we are using, like Metashape or RealityCapture or whatever you want to use, maybe the free ones, or also the free ones, they have no idea what to do with the information, because this surface, or in general all smooth surfaces, are smooth. So photogrammetry software in general is looking for points or for surface information on the mesh you are using to create markers. So intern markers in the software. So it's looking for surface information to compare on all the pictures you give the software. That's how it's calibrating the image. That's how it's creating the point cloud. And based on the point cloud, you get your mesh. So reflective stuff like a coffee mug or some glass, bottles, stuff like that. Metal, like new metal, rusty metal is completely fine, but new, fresh metal, there is nothing for the software to grab on. So it can't really compare any surface information besides color, which most of the time is not enough. So that's why the alignment process will fail, which is needed to generate a point cloud, which we need to generate a mesh. So that means we can't scan reflective objects. For the beginning, I would say stay away from that stuff anyway, like plastics, metals, everything reflective. Focus on really non-reflective stuff, maybe used metal, that's fine. Like rusty, really old, maybe old gas tanks, stuff like that, woks, some fruits. Even some of them can be tricky, like scanning a paprika. That can be really tricky because there is no surface information on the outside. It works, but it's tricky. So if you want a challenge, try paprika. Yeah, stay away from shiny stuff. However, it can be done because you just need some coating spray, some toothbrush, a little bit of black paint. And the workflow normally is you have your original item, you put the spray on it. There is like special scanning spray, it's called. And then you just make some black paint on a toothbrush and sprinkle it around. So it looks like this in the end. Because if it's glass, you basically just want the surface information, and the glass effect can be applied with a texture and a shader. So you don't really need it, you just want the form of it. And that's what's happening here. So they just took a lot of different angles. We don't do so much angles in the course. We don't need a lot of these angles. Normally, I would say go for 3 angles, straight on, a little bit higher, and 45 degrees. That's really enough for simple objects, sometimes even overkill. But they have quite a complex object here. And take a lot of images, put them into RealityCapture, and as you can see, it's aligning really well. So about 350 images, and they have a mesh, and just clean it in ZBrush, put it, I think, in Modo, and render it out. And as you can see, it looks really good. So you can scan shiny stuff, maybe not in the beginning, but technically it is possible. Photogrammetry is a lot of thinking out of the box. You really need to adapt to the stuff you want to scan and to your surroundings if you scan outside. So you really need to think about stuff and how you can make it work. So that's just something I wanted to cover. In general, don't scan shiny and reflective stuff. It is true, but if you really want to go for it, you can. I see you in the next video. So this is the whole setup I'm using at the moment. Looks cheap. It kind of is for photogrammetry, but it works. One of the most important things to keep in mind, keep it simple. you don't need rocket science like stuff to get good results, because the results come from the images we take and kind of from the software, but yeah, the software is based on, or the result of the software is based on what we feed into it. So I kept it really simple. At Epic Games or at Quixel, I can say that much. It was way more expensive and way higher end hardware, but this works as well. So let's go over it real quick. That's my camera, and keep in mind that's just my stuff. You can get it for even less money, so you don't have to spend everything on it. That's a Sony a7M II. Then I have my flash transmitter, the flash itself with the polarizer in front. So this one is just attached with magnets. A steady tripod. So you need a good one which can hold, I would say, up to 8 kilograms, because this construction has some weight to it. So the camera weighs something, the flash weighs something, and the flash has quite some big batteries, so there is some weight on the tripod. So don't get like an Amazon Basics one for 20 euros. Get a good one. The most cool stuff of my setup is this table, because you can adjust the height. Obviously I could just change the height of the tripod, but it's easier to just change the height on the table, and that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I have my table, I have the remote for the turntable, which we will cover in a second. I have my color checker, that's the X-White passport color checker. Then I have quite a cheap turntable, it's like 50 euros, but can hold up to 20 kilograms. And with the remote, I can set the angles or the rotations I want. So I can divide 360 degrees, so a full rotation, by 32, and that's about 11 degrees. And that's perfect for a normal shoot. Normally I just overshoot a little bit, so I would go for 48, but 32 works perfect for easy stuff like this apple, which we will cover in this course. Then I have my awesome solution for the background separation. That's just the empty Pringles can with some cloth around it and some rubber bands to hold it in place. Why? Because some people won't tell you really this important step. You want to have as little platform for the object to sit on as possible. Why? Because so the separation for the software is easier. If we would, let's put it like so. If we would put the apple on this platform, we have a lot of platform and we don't need this. We just need enough so the asset can't move. And in the end, it's easier for the software to separate the object and the ground from the background, because there isn't so much unnecessary support for the object. So that's a really handy trick nobody is really talking about in other courses. Yeah, keep this in mind. Make your support as small as possible, but so the object is still sitting relaxed. It can't fall over. It won't go anywhere. Yeah, it's sitting perfectly on the can. Yeah, that's the turntable. There is some black top you can put on if you want. For bigger objects, that's quite useful, because then you don't get the annoying white. Also, white is reflecting the light a little bit. You could see it in a scan. It's rarely visible, but it can happen that you can see some reflection on the underlaying part because of the white color. So try to go black every time. And then we have the background. That's nothing fancy. It's like 20 bucks or 30 bucks from Amazon. I didn't even put it in the washing machine or in the dryer. You can use it with the wrinkles. That's all fine. It's just the separation for the software, so it can separate the asset from the background. So that's the whole setup. Here is my desk on this side. You need like, I would say 1.50 by 1.50 m, or let's say 2 by 2 meters, like a small area where you can scan stuff. And yeah, that's everything. Let's go on the PC. So one more important thing about this setup is keep it clean, because the most annoying thing for you to scan and for the software, for the alignment, is dirt. So as we can see, it's already a little bit dirty. Just get some mild brush, nothing hard, and keep your area clean, because all the little dirt particles, if you scan rocks, like rock chip stuff, dirt from the outside, that can all be very annoying for the software, and you can get misalignments. So every time you scan something which can crumble, like some dirt, earth, ground stuff, I don't know, rock-like, make sure to clean it after the scan, because you don't want to have dirt all over the place and on the background, and then you get a lot of false triggering from the camera because the focus could be off, or you can get misalignments in the software. That's not worth it. Just clean it after scanning. And now let's hop to the PC, and we will go over all the assets I just talked about. So before we can start scanning, we need to test something. And for that, I got my little test mirror. Let me turn on everything real quick. So the camera, the receiver was already on, and the flash. So it was just in sleep mode. And let's turn off the light. So we need to check if all our filters are in sync. So if this filter is in synchronization with, well, you can't really see it, with the lens filter. And the easiest way to do this is with the mirror, because if we turn the flash on, and let's sync it up and activate the light, we have, I hope you can see it on the camera image, we have quite a blue light. Blue means it's synchronized. And if we take a picture, we have a beautiful, let's see if we can preview it. We have a beautiful polarized image, and we can see that because of the blue color we get from the polarized filter on the lens and on the camera filter, well, on the flash filter, this one. Because when they sync up, we get exactly this effect. And now we know we can start scanning. But before, we need to know what kind of intensity we need for the flash. Well, it's not super hard rocket science. You can go over or under a little bit. But there is one way you can test it. If you have your scene set up and your background is in place, keep your scene empty like this and just make an empty shot. Oh, that one was without flash, so we need it with the flash triggered, like so. Flashing means, with my Sony camera, the shot is empty. It's an extreme. The display is a little bit sensitive, or not the display, the viewfinder. If you get too close to it, it's covering the display. But we can see we have all the extremes here. This is all black. So that is what we want. But I know already my settings. So 1.8 plus 0.3 is quite dark. I would say 95% of the time I shoot with 1/4 or 1/4 plus 0.3. And let's just put the apple on its little DIY stand, like so. And let's give it a shot. So 1/4 plus 0.3. Okay, as we can see, the background is flashing. Also, the foreground where the apple is sitting on is flashing too. That's good. And it's hard to bring that over with the camera here. This looks very bright on my phone camera, but it really isn't. We have the extreme blacks. That's this little bar on the left here, but most of the values are in the middle. There's a little hill in the middle. So for me, that indicates it's not too bright, it's not too dark. It's a good base to work on, because in Lightroom, we can change it anyways. Normally, you shoot a little bit brighter, and if the picture is too bright for your liking, you just reduce it a little bit. It's way harder to introduce light later on if you shoot too dark. So maybe make it always a little bit brighter, and if needed, just turn it down in Lightroom. And yeah, that's basically the preparation for the first scan. I normally would grab my remote and put it on 32 or 48 images, depending on the asset and the complexity. And I shoot it a whole rotation. When the turntable is done, it makes a little beeping noise. So I just go ahead then and flip my apple like so. And when it's laying like this, I give it 2 rotations. So that means, what, 2 to 3 rotations. That means I'm shooting 32 or 48 images. When it's done, I rotate it once, do the same again. Oh, I rotate it twice, and then I put it in this position and shoot it like this again. So I will end up with 4 to 6 rotations, because that's a pretty straightforward asset. I am not even introducing different angles, so the camera is angled pretty straight on. Normally you can angle it a little bit from above, like a 45-degree angle if you have some complex asset with sharp corners, so you have enough overlap for corners or for sharp edges. And then you can go even one angle more, like, I don't know, 70 degrees, but that's not necessary for your first easy scans like this apple. That's pretty straightforward. And yeah, I go ahead, scan the apple. I will give you a time lapse on how it looks. That takes maybe 5 minutes, I would say, 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in this range, because the turntable is not the fastest, but it's really smooth. That's more important than speed. And yeah, pretty straightforward. Also, when starting your scan, you need to make sure your object is obviously in focus and is filling up most of the frame. It's hard to see because it's black and there is an object. So make sure your object filling up the frame as much as possible, but also make sure you have some empty space around it. So you don't want to get too close, and also when shooting your object, make sure to find out what the best focal length is for your lens if you're using a zoom lens. So as you can see, I'm using a 24-70 and I'm on 70 millimeters. And every lens has its best operating range. So that's why fixed lenses are also in existence, and that's why they are recommended for photogrammetry. So every lens has an operating window. Make sure to find out what the best focal length is, and also don't change it while shooting. So I'm on 70 and I will stay on 70. So I'm on 125 for the shutter speed. That's just the synchronization for the flash. Depending on the flash, you are normally between 1/100th and 200, but make sure to check the manual of your flash and your camera for the best settings. I'm on f16. That's the depth of field. F16 totally fine, good enough for the stuff I'm scanning inside of the studio. You don't need f22. That's a little bit much and it can get noisy. And the ISO as low as possible. 100 works totally fine with this kind of scan. And one thing I forgot about the lens, that's for every lens. Make sure to check out what the minimum distance for focus is, because every lens has a different minimum distance it needs from camera to subject. For this lens, it's about 40 centimeters, if I remember correctly. If you were too close to the object, the focus wouldn't work. Easy way to check it out, if you just press the shutter button, you hear the sound, it's focusing, it's perfect. So now everything is captured and we can start putting our raw images into Lightroom. Before we do this, let's quickly go over to the Epic Games site. It's saying here on the Epic Games dev site, do not use the camera lens profiles because, like I said, RealityCapture can do this on its own. Pretty sure Metashape is doing the same workaround for distorted images. So just make sure to disable it in Lightroom or in Camera Raw or Darktable or whatever you are using for working with your raw images. And don't crop your images. I see that also a lot of times. Don't do that because you have a fixed sensor size in your camera. Work with it. Even if you think that space is empty, it's black, I don't need it. But the software is using even the empty space because it knows the sensor size and it's seeing what camera was used for shooting the pictures. If you give it cropped images, that could result in a loss of quality. Just don't crop your images. Use the full sensor. It's also saying the exact same stuff here. And with that said, let's hop over to Lightroom and adjust the images. So I just drag and drop all my images into Lightroom. And here I have my color checker. That's always the last image I take. And my Apple. So in total 130 images. Maybe 120 would have worked too, 110. But that's a general rule for photogrammetry. Make sure to overshoot by about 10 to 20%. So if you think I need 200 images, get more, get 220, 230, whatever. It's just on an SD card. Make sure to have more than less because it's easier to delete images we don't use to take new ones when we are at home and we can't take anymore. So always overshoot with photogrammetry. And when we have everything imported, I just double click my color checker and hit develop. You could right click it and export it as a camera calibration and give it a name like, I don't know, Apple One, then you need to restart Lightroom and you could apply it to all the images. But we don't really change so much stuff here, so we can just sync it over like this. And I just make sure I'm on the calibration method I want to use. There are different ones. For the beginners, I would say just stick with the latest one in Lightroom and go up to the important stuff, lens corrections, disable profile correction. As you can see, Lightroom is already figuring out what lens we did use, and here are a lot of different Sony lenses, so it knows what we used for shooting this stuff, because that's all stored in the EXIF file in your images. You can use like PIE, which is a program which is reading this information, and there is so much stuff stored in a single image. So Lightroom has an easy time to figure out what lens you did use. But just disable it. You can use remove chromatic aberration. I never had a problem with that. So you can turn it on, turn it off, whatever you want. I turn it on. I don't want any noise reduction because depending on what you are scanning, we basically deleting the information the software is using to generate the point cloud. So I'm not using any, but I'm using sharpness, and I think 40 is a little bit less. I normally use about 50. And don't overdo it, because adding sharpness is basically the same like adding noise. If you add too much, the image gets too noisy, but 50 works really well for everything you scan, so I never had any problem with that. For the tone curve, make sure it sets to linear. We don't want any different line of contrast, like a strong or medium contrast. We want a clean, raw image, and that's the linear contrast. If you don't have this point curve here, maybe it looks like this for you. Make sure you are on the not parametric, at the point curve, like so, and just put it on linear. And with that, we are almost done. So I just pick my dropper and choose one of the white balances, so one of these gray areas I want to use. Let's try this one. And then I just hit Ctrl A, sync, check all, and synchronize. And now all these changes I just did here, which you, by the way, can see on the left, that's your history. This history gets transferred to all the images in this lower area. So all the 129 other images. So I normally just scrub through it, pick a random one, and then I look at a few others and just zoom in. Is the texture fine? Looks good. Sometimes you can try and add some texture, so it's getting a little bit sharper. But you also need to look at the other stuff, like this black area. Is it adding too much texture to this? And you have very little to play around with. Some cool stuff is removing highlights. I mean, we don't really have any highlights because we are shooting polarized. But if we zoom out and maybe fix it with a little bit more exposure, you can see removing the highlights is making the image even flatter. But for this scan, I stay with the defaults. By the way, that's how the image was imported from the camera. And that's how it's looking now. So quite a big difference. I'm happy with that scan. So I'm not changing anything. I don't think it's too dark. If it's too dark, you could just add a little bit of exposure. Well, maybe let's add a little bit. Let's add 0.2. Then I hit Ctrl A again. Oh, wait, where is my 0.2 image now? So here's my image again. I hit Ctrl A, but then I need to make sure I go back, hold Ctrl and click the color checker. So this isn't selected anymore, because if I was synchronized now, the exposure we just adjusted would be also written into the color checker. I don't want this. I mean, it wouldn't be too bad because I'm not using the color checker after this anymore, but just to make sure. So I hit synchronize, and now all images are a little bit brighter, as you can see if I hover over it. And with that, I just hit Control A, right click, export, and let me choose my folder. So I set my folder to wherever I want to export the images. And now I make sure I'm on JPEG, 100% quality, no limit to file size, sRGB IEC profile, because they have different color spaces in here. And you can use some not external sharpening. You can use some output sharpening. So when we export, there is also a little bit of sharpening also applied on the images. So if I export, Lightroom is adding a little bit of sharpness. I normally use matte or glossy paper. It doesn't really matter that much. And I use it on low, or I think it was glossy paper on low, yeah. And that's basically it. After that, I just hit export. And with that, in the top left corner, Lightroom is exporting. Depending on how many pictures you just shot, this will take a few minutes. So if you are over 400, this can take some while. But yeah, just let it export, and I see you in the next video. So let's go over the Metashape interface real quick. We don't need a lot of the stuff which is in here, but some stuff I changed is under Tools and Preferences. If you have multiple GPUs, make sure on the GPU they are all ticked, because you can use multiple. And you can use CPU when performing GPU accelerated processing. I don't do this because normally GPU is fine for me, so I leave that one turned off. But it's an option in the application. The only thing I changed in here is just putting it into dark mode. And under appearance, I made my region, which is the region area your model is in, so the outline of it, I made it a little bit more transparent and made the border a little bit thicker, and I changed the colors. So that's everything I changed. So now we can check what we have in this app here. If we import our images, we will have it here in a chunk. A chunk is basically your workspace. You can have multiple chunks. You can add and delete them. And we just put our images here. And after that, we can basically follow the workflow tab. So we will align the photos. We will build the mesh, then the texture, and then we are done. We don't need a separate point cloud or a panorama or stuff like that. If we have multiple chunks, we can align and merge them. So for instance, if you have an object which you scanned and it's in two pieces because you didn't have enough overlap, you can align chunks and get a final one mesh out of multiple chunks. Then over here we have the selection, so we can delete all the garbage area we will have later on in the scan. Here we can move the region where the scan is, and here we can interact with the scan, rotate it, scale it, move it, reset the transforms. And here we have vertex colors. Here we will have textures and the shaded view for our model. And here we can enable or disable the camera view. I just wanted to get this part out of the way so we can focus on aligning the images and creating the mesh later on. So I don't have to explain it while I'm working in Metashape. But I would say let's get started and import our images. I see you in the next video then. So when we are in Metashape, and by the way, I have the standard version, so the cheap one for $180, we need to get our images in here. And for that, there are multiple ways. You can import them over add photos or add folder. I will just drag and drop mine into here. Give me a second. So I have all my Lightroom images and I just put them in this chunk. And now they are in the application. You can open the folder and then you can, for instance, double click an image, take a look at it. So if you have all your images, you could estimate the quality of it. That's not really necessary for this stuff. So the application is ranking your images below 0 and 1 with different quality estimations. But for small scans like this, that's not really useful. If you have some complicated stuff, you can check the quality and see what image is not really useful for the scan based on the score Metashape is giving the images. But yeah, we don't need this yet. So yeah, with that, we can just close our folder again. And we just click on workflow, align photos. And here we have a basic accuracy dropdown we can use. I go for highest and leave everything on default. There are two numbers you can change. The key point limit and the tie point limit. For more information about this, check the manual because it's really complicated to talk about what these numbers are doing. A short sentence about it. These numbers are basically figuring out how dense your point cloud is. The more dense your point cloud is, the more dense your mesh will be because there will be more connections between more points. Default should be 40,000 and 4,000. I just put 80,000 and 8,000 in here. The higher you set it, the longer the alignment will take, also based on the accuracy, so they work with each other. Just for fun, let's maybe double it. I know the alignment, I made a test alignment already, took about 2 minutes or so, and let's just see how long it takes. You maybe just use 40,000 and 4,000. This also really depends on the system you have. Metashape still has a quite a high system requirement. If you use a lot of images, I think after 200 it gets pretty high. So if you have more than 200 images. And the most important stuff for this is a good GPU and a lot of RAM or a lot of memory, because everything gets loaded into this. So I'm on 64 gigs of RAM, not a lot, but good enough for most of photogrammetry, for most of the photogrammetry work. And my GPU is a 4070, so not a TI or anything, just a normal card. And that works really well. So let's see how long it takes if I use these numbers. You enter 40,000 or 80,000 here, depending on your system, like I said, and 4,000 here. And I try this amount. And yeah, I will click OK, then it will start aligning the images, and I see you when it's done. So now we are back and we have our point cloud. If you look on the left, you have your tie points, so roughly 200,000. Based on the test scan I did, it improved a little bit. I think before I had 150. So it's not a huge improvement, but it's a really solid point cloud we have. The black stuff is my holder where the asset was laying on. That's normal because it obviously is a little bit in the frame. And if we enable the cameras here, we now can see how we shot the image. And that's basically the effect you want. Here was some shift, not sure why, could be the interpretation of Metashape with the images, but that's what you want to achieve, like a sphere of images around the object you scanned. So we should have pretty good coverage. And let's disable this. And yeah, looks good to me. We can start a cleaning if we want. I normally clean in the scan mode, not the point cloud itself. So yeah, let's hop over to the next video and I'll show you how we can connect the dots to get the mesh. I see you in the next video. So with the images aligned, we now can create our model. That's really easy. We could just right click our chunk, go to not to add, to process and build mesh, or we can just go on our workflow and build mesh. So here we have the option of our source data, depth maps or tile points. Normally depth maps are a little bit more accurate, but it takes longer to get to the result. You can also use tile points, and you could use this for a 3D mesh or a height field, so 2.5D, that would be maybe like a surface scan. I use depth maps and make sure it's on 3D, quality ultra high, yeah, and my face count is set to 0. Why is that? 0 means it's infinite. Metashape tries to get the best mesh out of the data we give it. So in this case, the depth maps. We don't have them yet. They will be created when we click OK. So first it's creating the maps, and based on these maps, the model is constructed. If we look under advanced, we can change the interpolation. I would leave all of this on default. That's completely fine. The depth filtering also. And I calculate vertex colors even if I don't use them, just to have a nice visual, visual effect in the viewport to see if everything worked out with the scan. So I leave that one ticked. For the face count on the quality, I guess it makes sense that ultra high takes obviously the longest. So maybe start with medium or high and maybe give it one of the presets, low, medium or high for the face count. Custom is the one I have, that's 0. Because I already tested this Apple and I know my hardware, I know this will take about 20 minutes or so to generate the mesh, somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. That's because I know the hardware, I know the application, how long it takes. So if you just want to give it a quick test and just see what happens, put it on high or medium and use a preset face count and see what happens. So I will hit OK, and then Metashape will start to create the depth maps and the model. And I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll create the texture for our model. So now we have our mesh and we have about 50 million triangles, which is quite okay for a small apple. And as you can see, the black stuff, so my apple holder, is still in this area where the asset is, and now I will remove it. And it's super simple and easy. I just go to the rectangle selection and put it on freeform, and I just draw it around like so and hit delete. And I do it here also. And I'm doing this in the mesh process because I think it's easier to see where really, or where the noisy area we want to delete is. Because if you do this in the point cloud state, often it's not really clear what to delete and what not. I mean, we have almost 200,000 points, but if you zoom in, it can get quite annoying to look at and select the points you really want to delete. And because in this stage everything is now a mesh, I think it's way easier to delete. So in general, the model looks good. Let's switch to solid view without vertex color. And yeah, that's quite a nice mesh. You have some deformations because, I mean, it's an apple. It's not super smooth and round. So you have some natural dips and valleys and like some dents here. The only thing which isn't super nice, I mean, it's still good, nobody would really notice, is that the stem is attached to the apple here itself. So that's maybe something we would need to fix. The bottom part looks good, all fine here. And let's switch back to the shaded view, so with vertex color. And with that we can, yeah, complete our Metashape experience, or almost complete it, with building the texture. For that I just go on a workflow, hit build texture, and now I can choose what kind of texture do I want. An occlusion map, a diffuse map, and what should my source data be. So obviously the images should be the source data. If you would have a really high quality scan, which 30 million isn't, that would be like maybe 30 billion. We could use this as our source data. I would leave it on images, and we want a generic mapping mode with the mosaic blending. There are different blending modes. Mosaic is still the best. RealityCapture just introduced it with the latest 1.3 update, or they improved it. And I also enable a hole filling and ghosting filter. So the ghosting filter would be if you have an area with blur, it will replace that area with something else. And it never hurts to have it on, for me at least. So I turn these on and I try to make a big of a texture I can without going over the limit for Marmoset, because I put all my assets into Marmoset and check them, and the texture size limit from what I know is still 16K. So, I mean, you could create a 32K map if you want, but that's not really needed. So 16K, 8K, 4K, whatever you want, you just enter 4069 and you get a 4K map. And 16K, yeah, is plenty, I would say. If we use this asset maybe later on, we have a good base to work with, because after that we will test the same scan in Metashape, not in Metashape, in RealityCapture, and see what result is the best. So we will compare them in Marmoset. And based on that decision, we choose the one, or I choose the one I want to work with. So far, yeah, pretty straightforward workflow in Metashape. The mesh took, I would say, 20 minutes, alignment 10 minutes. So let's say 1 hour if you still delete and adjust stuff. That's not too bad. So now I will build my texture. And after that, we will export our high poly scan, and yeah, let's see how the texture looks. I'll see you in the next video. So now our texture is done, and well, it doesn't look quite different. That's because I'm still in vertex mode. If we hit this little drop down here and change it to model textured, we will see a difference in the appearance of this little apple. And as you can see, it's beautiful and flat. Well, that area not so much. So let's see what RealityCapture is doing with that area. I mean, it's not really hard to clean. I would put it into ZBrush, cut it here, fill the stem, and just put some detail back onto it and fill the hole in the app. But in general, I'm happy with the mesh. And that's a really good start. That will be interesting to see what RealityCapture comes up with. And that's always, if you have the time and you have access to both softwares, compare them with each other. So see which software gives you the best result. So now we are done, and if you want to export it, you just right click your model and export model. And I created a folder for myself, called it Metashape Export. Obviously, I will give you the exported meshes and all the war stuff. And let's call it Metashape Apple. And yeah, OBJ should be fine. We don't need to animate it. So yeah, we don't need FBX. OBJ works. And we want to export our texture as a PNG. You could use JPEG, but I just normally use PNG. And I don't need any vertex normals or vertex colors. Yeah, it's fine like that. And I just hit OK. Let it export. This can take some time depending on the complexity and size of your asset. And with that out of the way, we will do everything again now, but in RealityCapture. So export your mesh, and I see you in the next video when we play around in RealityCapture. So now we are in RealityCapture version 1.3, so the latest one at the moment. And as you can see in the top right corner, I'm also using the PPI license. So as I talked about in the overview video, that's the license where you pay for your export. For me at the moment, because I'm more using Metashape, that makes sense. So I don't want to invest like 3,500 euros just for a normal license. And depending on the pictures you input, it's not super bad, so the pricing. So RealityCapture looks a bit different. You have a lot of different viewports. My favorite one is this one. You have your 1Ds, your console, and your 3D viewport. If you want to change a viewport, you just hold your left mouse button. So you click this button and hold it, and then you can change it to whatever you want. So I put that one on 3D again. And the first thing I'm always changing when I need to reinstall RealityCapture is under settings, so workflow, settings, and I put my navigation style to Autodesk. Default is, I don't know, it's really annoying. So I just put it to Autodesk, and so left mouse button is rotate, right is zoom, and mouse wheel is pan. And that works really well. So in theory, we can follow this line. So you have your workflow, which has one magic button, like this start button, which is creating everything for you. That's not the workflow we want to focus on. We just put our images in here and then go to alignment and align the images. There's also a draft mode, which is a quick align with reduced image size. That's really useful if you have really big scans or scans with a lot of images or complex scans. So you could do a draft, which is still a good alignment, but more on the rough side. So it's not that accurate, but it's really, really great to have. Then we could add control points and detect markers, but that's something for the more advanced course. Because for markers we need to tell RealityCapture what is on the marker. So there are different shapes, different numbers and letters we need to feed to RealityCapture, so the software is able to detect the markers. But that's something for a different time. Then if we go under mesh model, we have our reconstruction area. That's the area where the mesh is in, so we can change it later on if we want. Then we have the normal button, the preview, and the high detail button. That's basically RealityCapture doing its job when creating the mesh, but more like different level of details. Most of the time, normal detail is fine, depending on how many pictures you have. Sometimes it makes sense to hit the high detail button. The difference between these modes is the downscale factor of the images. So normal detail is working with the same images, but it's downscaling them by, I think, half of it. High detail is working with the full resolution of the images, and preview is, let's check, preview is downscaling to, I think, quite an extreme amount. So if we go into preview, we can tell it use sparse point cloud Ah yeah, if we go under image depth map calculation, we can see the downscale factor. So the images get downscaled by the amount of 4 for the preview model and 2 for the downscale model. 1 would be the raw image or not the raw image, but the default resolution from Lightroom, and that would be for high detail. So I would always start with normal detail, see what we get, and based on that, maybe run it again through high or leave it on normal. After you have your model, you make a quick unwrap. I can't click it right now because we don't have a model here, so a model is needed. But we will go over that when we are at the step. And if you don't want to unwrap it, you can use colorize, so vertex color. And when you unwrapped it, you can use a texture, but you don't need to do a single unwrap. If you hit the texture button, it will unwrap the model for you. I just hit it once and then just texture. I just do it like that. And if we go in the unwrap settings, here we have some default parameters. As in Metashape, I just put it on 16K and I make sure I put the style not on a fixed or adaptive texel size, but on a maximal texture count. Because if you don't do it, RealityCapture will create multiple textures, which is really annoying if you want to just put it into Marmoset or test it in some other application. So I just put it on 16K, maximal texture count set to 1, and that's my default unwrap parameter then. So if I hit this button, everything will get executed under this tab. There is also the imported model default texture resolution, and that is something different. If we import a model into RealityCapture and unwrap it, or not unwrap it, if you just import it, that's the resolution RealityCapture is using. So that is something different, and you can change the coloring method. You always want to have multiband, and yeah, you can change a lot of stuff in here, but we don't need it. We just change the stuff I just showed you. And obviously, you don't need to use 16K. You can use 8K or 4K, whatever works for you. And that's everything for the Mesh Model tab. Then we have some cool stuff under View, because we can enable, disable the grid, like so. If we had cameras in the scene, we can change the scale of it. And under Tools, there's also a lot of useful stuff. The filter selection, lasso, advanced, but that's all stuff I will show you when we have our mesh and are ready to use it, because right now everything is grayed out because we don't have anything in the viewport. So I would say let's go back to workflow, and in the next video we will start importing our images and starting aligning our images here in RealityCapture. So I see you in the next video then. So now we can import our images. As before, I just use all the images without the color checker, and I just drag and drop them into the viewport. And the nice thing with the console here is, so console is hold the left mouse button and con. You can see all the steps RealityCapture is doing, which can be quite interesting when we align stuff and how many points we get per alignment, stuff like this. And if we hit plus, we can see all our images here. If we click them, the viewport will change to a different mode, but we can go through the images. And the cool thing here is we can see all the data we have. And we can, play with the lens distortion, with the calibration, with the posing of the image. But we don't need this stuff right now. We just go back to our normal viewport. Let me close this real quick. And as you can see, 129 images. And we could hit align, but let's check the settings real quick. I think I just played with a few settings in here. So The cool thing about RealityCapture is if you have no idea what the setting is doing, you just hover over it with the mouse, like the max features per megapixel, which will explain the numbers for you. Image overlap can be quite important. Most of the time medium is fine. For high we don't have enough pictures, and for low we don't have for low we have too many. So most of the time medium is fine. And yeah, max features per image, as the text says, if we can get it back, let's see. So that's the maximum number of features per image. I think that's normally also on 40,000. I'm not quite sure. I put it on 80 for my system. You guys maybe want it with the default settings. See what you get, compare it to what I will get, and change the numbers based on this. Under advanced, I didn't change much. I think only the pre-selector features, which is the number of detected features that will be used in alignment. I think I changed this one to 35,000. And the detector sensitivity is how sensible the detector for the images is when choosing images and choosing the amount of points and comparing it with the other images. That's how sensible this is. That's normally on medium. And the distortion model is quite interesting because there are a lot of different ones. Normally Brown 3, Brown 4, and I think even these two are good for normal cameras. And from what I can remember, for mobile stuff, these two K Plus Brown were quite good. I just leave mine on Brown 3 or Brown 4. And that's everything I changed in here on my version of the app. And now we are ready for the alignment. So I just hit align images. And yeah, RealityCapture is now running through it. You can see all the detection happening in the console. So it's saying, for instance, detected over 30,000 features in image, and so on. By the way, these estimations in Metashape and RealityCapture are normally completely off. Don't trust them. It's a really, really rough estimate. So I would not put any money on this status bar or alignment. But that was quite fast. So let's see. Yeah, that looks so far really nice. So if we zoom out, it gets more dense because we are way more far away from this alignment. And as you can see here in the console, it's already saying finalizing one component. So that means our scan was good enough that we have only one object. So, or one component as it's called in RealityCapture. If you have multiple, you would need to merge them. That's basically the same as in Metashape with working in chunks. Chunks are the same as components if you compare it. But that's perfect. We have 100% alignment, so every image aligned. And here we have all the poses, and you can see how many points every image has. Which can be interesting because then you can look at the image with the least amount of points and see or try to figure out why it has so much or so less points, and work on your scanning technique. So it's worth to take a look at this from time to time. But yeah, the alignment looks good. And now we have this little box, which is our reconstruction area. We could clear it, and if we hit this button again, it's auto-generated again. And we even can scale it, make it bigger, make it smaller. So that is way better than Metashape is doing. And with your keys on the numpad, you can change the viewport around. So general rule is you want to get at least general rule for this is you want to have basically only the scan in this box and not the debris which is around it. So I just switch to the views with my numpad and take a look if I can shrink it even more, but that's fine. And 0 brings me back to the 3D view. And now we have our alignment. So I would say in the next video, we will create our scan, our high poly scan, and see what we get. So I see you in the next video. So now we can create our high poly scan. By the way, let's see if I can get the pop-up again. So if we click this little paper button here, we can already see how much this result, well, not this one, but when we are done and click the export button, how much this will cost. So this would be about 800 credits, so $1 or let's say $2 for the whole asset. And if you export it, you basically own the license, so you only pay it once and can modify, export how many times you want, because the license is paid for the images which will be registered on the export. And then you can do whatever you want with these pictures in RealityCapture, but we will go over that when we export. So first, let's create the model. In the last video, I shrunk my reconstruction area. I mean, I could have rotated the mesh, and maybe let's do it. So if we go under Tools and set ground plane, we can just rotate the apple like so. So we have it roughly in line with the grid, maybe like so. And if we hit set reconstruction region again, it's resetting to the rotation we just did, and I just align it a little bit better like so, and switch to a different view like so. And let's see, yeah, that should be fine, that should work. So I hit 0 and I'm happy with that. And let's go under mesh model and hit normal detail. So let me pause the video and get back to you when everything is done on the normal stage, and let's see what the result is. Maybe it's good enough, maybe we don't even need high detail, and I see you guys in a second. So normal detail is done, and the cool stuff here is, well, before it was a little bit cooler because you could see how long each part took. Now it's showing the amount of VRAM, but in total it took about 2 minutes to do the whole normal detail process. And we have about 3.5 million triangles. By the way, the triangle amount is something a lot of people get hung up. It's not that important. If you have 3 million triangles but a super clean mesh, that's completely fine. It's not like the higher the triangle count, the better. That's not how it works. Most of the stuff comes from the texture, like most of the nice detail. Because right now we just have a sphere with some cylinders sticking out or some other shapes. And the triangle amount isn't really something useful. It's just the information for you to see how many triangles a mesh has. You want to have a certain amount because if you're baking, you want to get the most of the detail into your low poly. And to get a lot of detail, you need a higher triangle count. So I would say don't ignore it, but if you have like, I don't know, 30 million or 35 million, it doesn't make that much of a difference in the end. But 3.5 is okay. It's not perfect here in this area, but in general, the scan looks good. If we look at these little dots from the apple, it looks a little bit low poly because the images are downscaled on normal. So I would say let's run it through high detail, and let's see what high detail is creating for us. So I just leave it like it is and hit high detail, pause everything, and see you guys in a second. So now we are back, and this took a little bit longer, 590 seconds, but we have way more parts. So the mesh is now 19 parts, which is about 50 million triangles. So that's quite nice. And as you can see, we have way less scanning platform, let's call it like this, the holder I placed the apple on. And I would say let's go under tools and the lasso tool, and I just select the stuff I don't want. So if you hold down Control, you can select multiple select, or you can have multiple selections like so. And let me get all of them. And this one, that should be everything. Yeah, but there is a smarter method to make sure we don't have any floating points. So let me deselect everything. And if you go under the Advanced tab here, there's a button called Select the largest connected component. So obviously that should be our apple. Let's see what happens if we click the button. Our apple is now an orange. No, it's just selected. And if we go up here and hit invert, we get the inverse selection. So we get everything which is not our apple. And yeah, that's the stuff we want to remove. So let's close advanced and hit filter selection. So filter selection is basically just deleting the stuff. And every time you modify stuff in this box, so our mesh or your meshes or whatever, we get a new model. So as you can see, this model is now 14.8 million triangles. So if we would go ahead and just, I don't know, select this part, filter it out, for whatever reason you should do this, give it a second, we now have a mesh with 40.3 million. Let me deselect the lasso. Beautiful. And the cool thing in RealityCapture is we can just delete this mesh. So you have 3 seconds to click the undo button and it won't be deleted. And we can go back in history and look at everything else. So let's clean our history a little bit and delete the others. And if we go into the model here, we have the different model parts. So you can hide the parts you don't want to see. So we can hide everything for this mesh and unhide it again. And as you can see, it's also listing how much triangle each part has from this 14.8 million. And it's quite useful. So I think we missed one part. Oh no, that should be just the viewport not catching up. So here we are. And let's check out the model. It looks way sharper. And this area is fixed. So as you can see, it's not connected to the apple itself anymore. So that's really nice. Here it is. That's fine because we won't really see that area anyways. Yeah, it looks quite good. Here it's a little bit noisy. We could go into the smoothing tool and put it on, noise removal and smooth it in here. I'm not a huge fan of that. We can do that in ZBrush, or we can just leave it like it is, because in the next step we will create the texture for our model. And let's see how this side looks with the texture applied, because it could be just because without a texture it's just looking like that, and with the texture applied it could look way better. So yeah, let's go ahead, end this video, and in the next part we will go ahead and create the texture for our lovely looking apple. So I'll see you in the next video. So let's go ahead and create the texture for our lovely looking apple. And for that, I just go again under mesh model. And I just, like I said before, I unwrap by hand. So unwrap parameters should be default, max texture count, 1 texture, 16K. And you just hit unwrap. And then it's doing a unwrap of your model. And this, and I think the texture mode got really improved with the last update. So it's really, really fast. And there's always a little bit of a battle between Metashape users and RealityCapture users. Both apps are great. Sometimes Metashape is better. Sometimes RealityCapture is better. It's always good to know both. Even if you're not using them, it's always good to stay up to date and play around with everything a little bit. And by the way, you can even apply checkerboards and charts and stuff like that. But for this, we don't really need it. So now we have our UV. So we have a new tab, the model textures. And if we open that, we have the unwrap layer, which is 32-bit. And here we have the texture. Well, I'm pretty sure it's not looking super fancy. Yeah, it's looking like a checkerboard if you zoom in, or zoom out. So let's go back to my standard view and let's hit texture. So the texture mode can take some time because it's GPU based. I pause this video and I see you guys when the texture is already slapped onto this lovely apple. So I see you guys in a second. So welcome back and look at this beautiful apple. Let me delete the weeks. Let me delete the region real quick. And let's see. So yeah, as a Metashape, it looks really nice and crisp. And the cool thing is if we open the color layer, hit texture 0, we can see how RealityCapture is doing the UVs. And there's a lot of wasted space. Yeah, that's not really that bad because we are not using it like this. We will bake it down to a low poly. So obviously we will make better use of our UVs. But let me go back into the 3D view. And that's how you create nice looking textures in RealityCapture. So the next step would be creating our export, and for that we will need some and the next step is we will export this mesh, but we will cover that in a separate video because there are a lot of options to export from RealityCapture. And I see you guys in the next video. So a change of plans. Before we export our apple, we will decimate it. That's useful because if you want to create a low poly in RealityCapture, which you can do, you already know how this works. So let me show you how I decimate it and well, maybe why. Because I want to compare my meshes in Marmoset Toolbag, I can throw 250 million triangle meshes into Marmoset. That's not a problem. But because I'm recording here and because Marmoset is mainly using the GPU, it could be smarter to just decimate them down a little bit. So I do the same in Metashape. You don't have to do this, but then you know how it works and I show you how it works. So we have our 30, or let's say 15 million triangle mesh. And to decimate it, we just go under 3D tools. And under here, we just go to simplify. And let's say we want, let's say 1 million. So we enter our triangle count. And then we can already say if we want a color reprojection and a normal reprojection, and you can also use a height reprojection, but not in this case. So when we set 1,000,000, we can also say if we want the color we projected and the normals. And we could create a new unwrap, and let's just hit simplify. So I leave color reprojection on enable and normal also on automatic, which is enabled or not depending on how low we go with the triangle count. And under unwrap parameters, we can change it to a custom. So texture resolution, we could maybe say between 512 and 4K. And for the texture count, we can set it by hand or same as source, which makes sense because we don't want multiple textures. So we leave it as same as source because we already did set it up before. So when you're done setting everything you want, you could also change the type, absolute, relative, maximum, or minimum. We just hit simplify. This can take a second or a minute depending on the complexity of your mesh and how many triangles you have. So let's give it a second and see what we get in the end. So here we have our new model, and we are pretty close to 1,000,000. I would say 99.7 or 999.7. And we have our normal map. So if you click the texture, it's loading the map in right now, and our color layer, and perfect. Let's see if it's still loading the map. Yeah, it is. You can see these little dots here running around, but that's fine. We don't need to see the normal map. We can imagine how it looks. Sometimes if you have this look, you just need to go under Scene 3D View. And then you have your different modes. You have your vertices, you have solid, which is basically your mesh without any textures applied. And then you have sweet, which is your solid model with the textures applied to it. And that's how you decimate your model in, that's by the way the normal map. That's how you decimate your model in RealityCapture. In Metashape, it's roughly the same. Let me show you how it works there. So to get a lower version here, you just go under Tools, Mesh, Decimate Mesh, and then you just enter also 1,000,000 and hit OK. And then should you replace the default model? No. And Metashape is running through it and decimating the mesh we gave it as a source. And now you have two models. Just double click the 1,000,000 one. And that's already the one. So that's 12,000,000. That's 1,000,000. So right now we only have our 1,000,000 triangle mesh or faces here. And we need to generate the texture. For that we just go to Workflow, Build Texture. And now we have the option for a normal map, occlusion map, displacement map. Let's do a diffuse map, and let's use the images as source and hit OK. So it's doing the same texture process as before. Let's give it a second. So here we are, and we should have our texture. Yes, we have. Let's just also create a normal map, just because we did it for the one in RealityCapture, and as source we obviously need our 3D model, and we want to keep the UVs just so we compare the default values later on. So, and here we are again. If we check the textures, so we can also load our normal map here, which doesn't look super white in the viewport, but okay. Let's just go back to the diffuse map. And if we want to export, we just right click it and then export model again. And let's put it under Metashape save. Let's call it Metashape Apple Low. And we want it as a PNG texture. No vertex color, no vertex normal export. Just leave it like this. Hit OK. And it should also export the normal map. And yeah, indeed, it does export the normal PNG, and I'm opening them right now. Well, it's really smooth because we decimated only to 1 million, but we also have the albedo. And let's go back to RealityCapture and see how we can export there. So in RealityCapture, the export isn't too hard. You just hit the export button under workflow and then choose your format you want. I just use OBJ. For you, the only difference is maybe you don't have it under recently used, so just search OBJ. And yeah, you get dense mesh model and textures, OBJ. That's the one I'm using. And let's go under RealityCapture save. Let's call it RC Apple and hit save. And then it's asking for your key. So when you create your account for RealityCapture, you need to set a key. So if you buy credits, and it's saying, and it's also saying how expensive the export is. So that should be my key. Let's see. Yeah. And then you get the export options, and they can be defaults or nothing fancy to change. I just change the max texture size, also make sure it's power of 2, and export texture, normal layer, yes. And that should be good to go. Export to a single texture file, make sure that's on yes, and then just hit OK, and yeah, let it export. So with that out of the way, we can go to Marmoset and see how the meshes compare. And I also show you why we are comparing, because those softwares are doing photogrammetry, but they are doing it in a different way. So let's check it in the next video. So why are we using different softwares, or what is the difference between Metashape and RealityCapture? I got a pretty good comparison image from a friend, because there is a difference. Metashape is this one, and this one is RealityCapture. So if you quickly switch around, you can't really see much of a difference, but there is one. So RealityCapture is basically doing a good job for what it's doing. It's pretty sharp in everything you throw at it. So the ground cover here, or not the ground cover, the floor, let's say, is pretty sharp. Even the text on this little wench is pretty sharp. Also the detail on the rope. If you look at Metashape, it's also visible. You can see the rope, you can see the wench, you can see a little bit of the text. I hope you guys can see it. But the floor is a little bit soft. But if we zoom out, the first thing you can see is, if you look at the wench here, you can see the facets from the wench, which makes sense. But there are also some really glitchy parts. So that's not a rule for every scan, but RealityCapture is adding a little bit of noise, I guess. I don't know the exact math behind it, but everything from RealityCapture looks also a little bit more noisy than Metashape. So while this is a little bit more on the smooth side, it's still detailed, and there isn't much of fake noise, or here we don't have any error in the mesh. So if we compare this rope in RealityCapture to the one in Metashape, it still holds up really well. So it's still good enough, and we don't have any errors in it. So that's why it makes sense to compare softwares with each other in photogrammetry. If we look at the wench, in Metashape we have this nice detail, this outline here, This could be an error, I'm not sure, could be also the wrench. But if we look in RealityCapture, there's like a huge part missing, also here, also here, also here, around here. So sometimes it's better to don't use RealityCapture. It's a smart move to have both softwares. And yeah, running the same scan through both of them if you have the time, and compare the output with each other. If we now switch to Marmoset, for our Apple, there isn't much of a difference if we look at it in Marmoset. So this one is the RealityCapture Apple, this one is the Metashape Apple. Both look really good, and yeah, these are both 1 million triangles, so obviously you won't use them in the game because that's just an introduction to photogrammetry. I guess you know your high poly to low poly pipeline, so you would export a different amount of polygon, maybe use the 50 million as a base for baking, and then you just use your low poly for your Apple, whatever number that might be for you guys. So I'm not covering this because that's super basic 3D stuff. Everybody knows this or should know this. I just throw some 1 million poly in here and give it a quick look. But both of them turn out really great. And the only difference is the Metashape one had a little problem here. I would just fix it in ZBrush real quick. But yeah, again, that's just basic 3D. No need to cover this. And RealityCapture, for some reason, was smart enough to figure that out here. So could be a setting in Metashape. Could be that it needed more points in the beginning. But yeah, even if not, that's like a 5-minute fix. So super easy to do. But both of them look really good. And if we check the textures real quick, maybe not the normal maps because they are quite soft. So that's the diffused map from RealityCapture. It's okay. You can change the settings to use a little bit more of the texture space. In general, it's not the greatest tool for UVs, but because you only needed to generate the high poly and you bake it on the low poly anyways, nobody cares. So if it's displayed correctly on the mesh here in Marmoset, it's good to go. You can just create a low poly in Blender, Maya, Max, even in RealityCapture, give it UVs and bake it, and create your own UVs and bake it then. So yeah, it's not super important here. And let's check out the Metashape ones. So Metashape, for some reason, is doing a pretty good job with UVs. It maybe has a lot of cuts, like we have some small islands here. Pretty sure you could save some of them, but I didn't even mess with the UV settings. So for a default UV or for a default unwrap, that's pretty good. So I would go with Metashape on that one. And that one makes sense again to compare softwares. If you need the UV layout from the software for some reason, yeah, make sure to compare the softwares with each other, and yeah, make your homework. Don't use one software. Always compare and see what works best for you. And that's basically it for this little introduction to photogrammetry. So yeah, we did everything you do in a normal photogrammetry pipeline besides the low poly, because after this point, when you export your scan, you are back to your normal game art pipeline. So you have your high poly and then you do everything you normally do just based on the scan. So low poly, UVs, whatever you want. I hope this course was useful for you, and enjoy scanning stuff. I see you in the next one. Bye bye.